The morning dawned with a strange hue over Ouagadougou. The sky seemed denser, as if it were holding back tears for a sorrow yet to come. The air carried a different feeling. It was as though something was about to change, and everyone, even without knowing, breathed in that anticipation. In the pediatric wing of the capital's largest public hospital, silence reigned between crumbling plaster walls, where the smiles of children were scarce but still persisted. In room 208, a 7-year-old girl named Aisha gazed out the window at the dry courtyard, dreaming of something her doctors had dismissed months ago. She didn't speak much. Since being diagnosed with a rare heart condition, she had taken to expressing herself only with her eyes, and on that day, her eyes said everything: hope, longing, and a patience no child should ever know. Meanwhile, far from there, Ibrahim Traoré donned a simple white shirt and worn sandals. He was in his office, surrounded by military reports, international agendas, and pressures few men could endure for more than a month. But his eyes were elsewhere. In his hands, a handwritten letter. The handwriting was childish, shaky, but resolute. "My President, I know I am going to die, but before that, I wanted to see you." It was signed by Aisha. There was no demand, no emotional blackmail, just a simple, pure, silent plea. And it was that absence of expectation that struck Traoré like a thunderbolt. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if communing with something no one else could hear, then stood up in silence. He didn't call for cameras. He didn't announce an official visit. He simply asked his driver to take him to the central hospital. In the back seat, he carried only a bouquet of wildflowers and a handmade cloth doll crafted by an artisan from Bobo Dioulasso. When the car passed through the hospital gates, no one could believe it. Nurses froze at their posts. Doctors halted meetings. It wasn't common to see the president there, much less without a security detail in formation. But it was him. No uniform, no speech, no script. Just a man, with the demeanor of someone carrying a silent mission in his heart. The director of the pediatric ward rushed to him, nervous, trying to explain Aisha's clinical situation, the limitations, the risks. But Traoré only nodded respectfully and asked to be taken to the girl's room. The door to room 208 opened slowly. Aisha was sitting on the bed, playing with scraps of fabric, her head covered by a colorful scarf. When she saw the man standing in the doorway, she didn't react immediately. It was as if her mind took a moment to process, but then her eyes filled with tears, and she simply said, "C'est toi?" And he smiled. He knelt before her bed and said softly, "Oui, c'est moi, Aisha." She reached out her hand, and he held it as if it were an ancient porcelain vase. No ceremony, no public words, just two human beings meeting where the world often forgets, in the suffering of a child. Their conversation lasted nearly an hour. He listened more than he spoke. He asked about her drawings, her school, what she loved most. And then, in a moment of silence, Aisha revealed her greatest dream. "I wanted to be an airplane pilot." Her smile was shy, as if apologizing for desiring something so impossible in her condition. But Traoré didn't laugh. On the contrary, his eyes darkened, as if a flame had been kindled. He said goodbye with a kiss on her forehead and left the room with slow, pensive steps. Outside, he looked at the sky and said only, "We'll make it happen." That same afternoon, the president gathered his small, trusted team. There was no time for bureaucracy. The child was terminally ill, with perhaps only weeks left. That's when the idea emerged, to simulate a full flight for Aisha, complete with a uniform, cockpit, control tower, and even volunteer passengers. It would be an almost impossible mission in such a short time, but those who knew Traoré understood he didn't take kindly to the word impossible. In less than 48 hours, a hangar at Ouagadougou's airport was transformed. Air Force technicians, engineers, artists, all collaborated in silence, moved by the request. And at the center of it all was Ibrahim, overseeing every detail. He wanted for just 1 hour for that girl to forget her illness. He wanted her to fly. The next morning, a helicopter landed discreetly at the hospital. Doctors authorized the transport with utmost care. Aisha was taken, accompanied by 2 nurses and her mother, who couldn't hold back her tears. When they arrived at the hangar, Aisha fell silent. For the first time in weeks, her eyes widened with pure wonder. There stood a Boeing 737 painted with her name, Le vol d'Aïcha. Traoré greeted her in a commander's uniform and announced with ceremonial gravitas, "Captain Aïcha, your crew is ready." She laughed in a way the doctors hadn't seen in months, laughed with her heart. During the simulated flight, Aïcha sat in the pilot's chair, pressed buttons and listened to radio commands. Everything felt real. The window displayed clouds created by digital projection. Engine sounds vibrated through the space. Even a slight turbulence was staged, and at the end a crowd of volunteers posing as passengers applauded her. The girl removed her pilot's cap and bowed with elegance, and in that moment there was no pain, no death, only life, pure, light, eternal. When the day ended, Traoré took Aïcha to the tarmac and said, "Today you flew and no one can take that from you." She smiled, weak but happy, and before being placed back in the helicopter, she gripped his hand tightly and said, "Now I can sleep." He replied, "Sleep in peace, Captain." That night, the sky over Burkina Faso seemed different. Above the capital, the stars shone with an intensity reminiscent of ancient omens. Those passing through the streets didn't know exactly what had happened in that hangar, but a sense of a silent miracle lingered over the city. In the central hospital, the corridors were quieter than usual. Doctors exchanged silent glances, moved, as if they had witnessed something greater than medicine. And in room 208, Aïcha slept as she hadn't in a long time. The smile lingered on her face, and her mother, sitting by the bed, no longer held back tears of pain, but of gratitude. The days that followed were not easy. Aïcha's condition remained critical. Her body, fragile as paper, showed signs of exhaustion, but her soul was at peace. And it was that peace that spread like a rare perfume across the country. Traoré's gesture, kept quiet by official channels, exploded on social media after an emotional nurse discreetly posted a photo of Aïcha dressed as a pilot beside the president. The caption read simply, "Today, a child flew." And that image crossed borders, religions, ideologies. Suddenly, the world was talking about an African leader who, instead of escorting generals or cutting red ribbons, spent an afternoon fulfilling the dream of a girl on the brink of death. In a few days, journalists tried to interview Traoré. They asked for statements, interviews, headlines, but he refused them all. He said only, "It wasn't about me, it was about her." And with that, he sealed the story as if it belonged solely to the girl and the people who learned to love more deeply because of her. But, as with every story that touches a nation's soul, it refused to die. In Bobo Dioulasso, young people painted murals of Aïcha as the captain of a ship made of flowers. In Wahiguya, schools staged small plays inspired by the girl's flight. And in churches, mosques and temples, prayers began to include Aïcha's name alongside national heroes. Meanwhile, Ibrahim Traoré remained silent. He observed but didn't interfere. He knew that kind of miracle cannot be controlled, only contemplated. Yet something had changed within him. That hospital visit hadn't been just an act of compassion. It had touched parts of him that neither war nor politics nor speeches had ever reached. And it was from this new feeling that he decided to do something unthinkable for a head of state in the midst of power. He called an extraordinary meeting with the Ministry of Health and proposed a pilot project to transform the country's most critical pediatric wards into spaces not only for treatment, but for fulfilling dreams. He asked for less concrete and more color, less paper and more soul. Architects, doctors, artists, and psychologists were summoned to reimagine how the country cared for its sick children. It wouldn't be a welfare program. It would be a program to restore hope. And the name chosen for the project was unanimous: the Flight of Aïcha. As the work began discreetly, something even greater was about to happen. 4 weeks after the hospital visit, Aïcha's condition worsened suddenly. An internal hemorrhage led doctors to declare the end was imminent. The hospital went into a silent alert. Her mother wept quietly in the corridor, while nurses clasped their hands, silent, as if about to lose a sister. And then, that night at 3:20 in the morning, Aïcha passed. The monitors shut off one by one, and for the first time since the hospital's construction, doctors and staff held a minute of silence outside a child's room. It was as if everyone knew. Something sacred had ended there. The next morning, Ibrahim Traoré's phone rang. He answered in a low voice. He listened to every word, and then, in silence, he drove alone to the hospital. He entered room 208, now empty, and stood there for long minutes. On the bed there was only the folded pilot's uniform and the cloth doll. He picked up the doll carefully, as if touching a holy object, and left. In the corridors, doctors and nurses lined up automatically, in absolute silence. No one applauded. No one spoke. Everyone knew they were witnessing a collective mourning. 2 days later, the funeral was held in a small village on the outskirts of Banfora, where Aicha's family had ancestral roots. Ibrahim attended without security. He knelt before the small white coffin and offered a silent prayer. Then, looking at the sky, he said, "Captain Aicha, mission accomplished." And with that, he placed a white flower on the coffin and withdrew. But that same day, before sunset, something astonishing happened. Thousands of children were seen wearing pilot hats in the streets across the country. Teachers handed out paper for them to draw their dreams. Networks broadcast messages with a single phrase, "Today we all fly with her." In the weeks that followed, the Aicha's Flight Foundation spread like a current of light. Hospitals in Ghana, Togo, Ivory Coast, and even the Congo requested permission to replicate the initiative. International leaders publicly praised the gesture, but Traoré, true to his simplicity, always said the same. "What I did wasn't politics, it was humanity." And that phrase began to circulate in schools, on walls, murals, and even in notebooks. Children repeated it like a new prayer. The president, known to many for his firmness against corruption and oppression, was now also seen as the man who made the impossible happen for a girl who only wanted to fly. And in a public ceremony in the capital's center, a training aircraft named Aicha 2-8 was officially delivered to a youth pilot training project. Before a silent crowd, Traoré took the stage, wearing his white shirt again. He picked up the microphone and said, "Some think courage is taking up arms, but true courage is facing pain with a smile, like she did." And then he looked at the sky, as if expecting a response from above. And perhaps it came, because for a moment a gust of wind blew fiercely through the flags, like a whisper from on high. Months later, while visiting a school in the countryside, Traoré saw something that made him pause. A girl was holding a notebook with a drawing of Aicha beside an airplane. Upon seeing him, she said, "President, one day I'll fly too." He smiled, touched her shoulder and replied, "You're already flying." And then he walked on in silence, with the sun behind him casting a long shadow. Not of a ruler, but of a man who had understood that transforming the world begins with the simple act of listening to a child's dream.